So my why was to always be that what I needed as a kid, reassuring and calm when talking about the weather. It made it easy. It made storytelling, and all weather was storytelling, easy. When I could focus on my why. Literally every time I stepped in front of a camera, I thought about that and how people were going to react to my presence, to my words, to my tone, and how I was talking about potentially bad weather. Welcome to the Storycraft podcast for professional storytellers. I'm your host, Kyle Adams, and I'm here to help you explore how stories shape our connections. Wondering how stories help you network and advance? Looking to bridge online and face-to-face worlds? Foster understanding and ignite innovation? Look no further. Whether you're a leader, communicator, educator, or just love a good story, join us for actionable insights, all aimed at helping you build stronger, better connections. We're glad you're here. Hello everyone, welcome to the Storycraft podcast. I'm Kyle Adams, and today I'm going to put my former meteorologist hat on, and I'm going to tell you 3 simple tips for public speaking from a broadcast meteorologist. First of all, when you think of public speaking, and I did it for over a decade of my life, and I still do it professionally, is really the first thing that comes to mind, and the most important thing, I think, of the 3 tips is to find your why. Megan and I talk about this all the time, and when we say to find your why, that just means what's the reason that you're doing what you're doing. And there was a very specific reason why I did what I did, why I was a broadcast meteorologist. It wasn't because I wanted to make a lot of money. It wasn't because of the fame. It wasn't because of the fortune. There certainly could be that in broadcast television, but not a whole lot of it. But the reason was because when I was a kid, when I was 9 years old, when I was 10 years old, I was deathly afraid of thunderstorms. I had so much anxiety as a kid of bad weather that it I don't want to say ruined my life, but it affected my everyday life so much so to a point where it was all I could focus on. I mean, it was true anxiety surrounding bad weather. I never really understood why when I was little, why I was so scared of bad weather, but I remember, even especially during the night, nighttime, whenever there would be a thunderstorm at night, being so scared that I would either, just hide under my covers, or a lot of times I'd end up going in my parents' room and sleeping on the floor. Because I didn't understand the weather. I didn't know anything about the weather. I was just scared of lightning and thunder, and I always just kind of thought that, a tornado was going to hit at any time. And as I got older, this fear lingered. I was probably in 4th, 5th, even 6th grade until I started to really learn about the weather. And once I learned about the weather, I read and I went to the library and got my hands on any book that I could, and learned about the processes of how thunderstorms and the weather worked. And once I started doing this, I started to realize, it's not that scary. And then I finally got over that fear. Long story short, it took several years, but it was bad. I would go on vacations and I remember sitting in wherever we were, or whether it was a condo or wherever we were staying at the beach, and just watching the Weather Channel all day instead of being out enjoying, being on vacation with my family. Even when the storms were 4, 5, 6 hours away, I would be scared even when there was the threat of a storm developing. But once I got over this, it just completely drove my decision to be a meteorologist. And once I became a meteorologist on television, that drove my presentation literally every single day. When I was on television, always thought about my why. I always thought about Kyle as a 10-year-old and how I sounded and how Kyle would interpret what I was saying as the person now talking about and warning people about the weather. And I knew as a 10-year-old that I needed somebody to reassure me and to have a calming voice, a presence about themselves that wasn't going to get me even more anxious or worried than I already was. And that is my why for being a meteorologist. That's why I was doing what I did. And that led me to naturally be a storyteller on television that came off as, natural. I mean, all the time I got comments from people. One, like, wow, you just seem to be so down to earth and so calm and so reassuring and so, just, a slow talker even. I got that one a lot. And I would always tell people, well, it was because, I would just always picture somebody that was my age watching or looking on the internet or seeing a clip on social media and needing that reassurance. So my why was to always be that what I needed as a kid, reassuring and calm when talking about the weather. It made it easy. It made storytelling, and all weather was storytelling, easy. When I could focus on my why. Literally every time I stepped in front of a camera, I thought about that and how people were going to react to my presence, to my words, to my tone, and how I was talking about potentially bad weather.
Love what you're hearing on this podcast? Consider booking me to speak at your next event. Dive further into the transformative power of storytelling with my keynote. Tell better stories, speak up, stand out, and build community. In a world that often amplifies our differences, my talk invites you to embrace genuine connections. Break free from the echo chambers and discover the art of storytelling. Learn how to share your own narrative, listen actively, and foster communities that flourish on shared experiences. Check out the show notes to learn more about how to book a talk for your next event.
Number one, I guess, was kind of long. 2 is a little shorter. 2 is moving away from self-consciousness to self-awareness. And what I mean about that is when you're self-conscious, you are debilitated by what others may think about you, okay? When you're self-conscious, you're at times frozen in fear to say what you may have on your heart or what you may have on your mind because you're just very concerned about what others will think about you. Self-awareness is when you can effectively and accurately monitor yourself and the effect it has on others. Okay? So there's a big difference. Self-awareness is having that awareness and ability to monitor the way that you are affecting other people in the midst of a conversation and being able to adjust. Self-consciousness lives in a state of fear, in a state of frozenness, right? So the second tip is being able to move from being self-conscious to being self-aware, okay? And when you're self-aware, you are more focused on your audience than yourself, which is my last tip, and that is focus on your audience. It's not about you, it's about your audience. This is an important third tip for public speaking because when you can focus on your audience and not yourself, and you can be self-aware of the way that you affect other people, it makes public speaking so much easier because you know that somebody out there needs to hear what you have to say. People don't live what you live every single day, whatever that may be, whether that's your profession or whatever it is that you're talking about. You think about these things all the time. And people tend to forget that others just don't know what they don't know. And it takes you saying something several times, like a lot of times. Research proves it for a point or, anything to sink in a lot of the times, right? We are inundated with information. So you saying something and maybe being self-conscious about the fact that, well, people already heard me say this, or, they have to know this, or why am I even wasting my time? And then you become frozen in fear, right? You just have to trust that people out there are going to need to hear what you have to say. Because again, weather, for example, for me. I studied it, I lived it every day. I know which way high pressure spins. I know which way low pressure spins. I know what the temperature of freezing is. I know how tornadoes develop. I know all these things about the weather that I take for granted that people don't know. By focusing on your audience and understanding that you will help somebody out there with what you have to say, or somebody will learn something from what you have to say, that's a big game changer, because a lot of the times one of the biggest things that I've seen is people becoming, going back to point number 2, too self-conscious about, well, I'm too repetitive, or people already know this, or you know what, chances are they probably don't. So again, to rehash, find your why. Move from self-consciousness to self-awareness, and then make it about your audience and not yourself. We're glad you've listened to this podcast episode. If you liked it, would you mind doing us a favor and sharing this episode with someone who would be interested in the topic too? We're on a mission to help everyone become a better storyteller. Don't forget to subscribe to the show and get updated every time we release a new episode too. Each and every episode is produced, hosted, and edited by us, Kyle and Meg Adams at Home Place Creative. Happy storytelling.